So what exactly went wrong for Ohara Davies? Can the mistakes he made against Josh Taylor be rectified? Can he come back and be a force in the light welterweight division in the future, either at British level, European, or even world level? Well, I did touch on some of the things that Ohara Davies did wrong. I just want to reiterate some of them and speak about maybe a few things that I didn't touch on in my post-fight video. As a fighter, going into any fight, and just in general, you have to be aware of your own shortcomings. You have to strategize, taking your shortcomings into account, particularly when your opponent's strengths are able to exploit your shortcomings. In this fight here with Ohara Davies and Josh Taylor, going into the fight, Ohara Davies admitted that Taylor was the faster fighter. He said, yeah, Josh Taylor is faster than me. So that was no mystery or surprise to anyone. Josh Taylor was the faster guy. I had said that in my pre-fight videos. Josh Taylor's faster than Ohara Davies. Better hand speed, better coordination, better balance, so on and so forth. Ohara Davies was the guy with the power and the long arms and the awkwardness. Now, having such long arms, you want to try and keep the fight at long range. When you're up close against a guy like Josh Taylor or at mid-range, you don't want to be cranking wide shots because that puts you at a disadvantage against Taylor, who has the shorter arms and the better technique. So if Ohara Davies was aware of his shortcomings, then he wouldn't have even tried to exchange wide swinging shots up closer at mid-range with Josh Taylor, because Josh Taylor is in his element at mid and close range with the faster hands and a better technique. Ohara Davies must have known this going into the fight. His trainer, Tony Sims, must have known this going into the fight. His trainer, Tony Sims, must have been able to see this from ringside watching. He must have been able to tell Ohara Davies this in the corner between rounds. Did he tell him this? Didn't he tell him this? I don't know. But that is a classic example of somebody playing into the hands of their opponent's strengths and exposing their own weaknesses quite recklessly. Ohara Davies would have been better off staying on the outside, even if it had become a bit of a stalemate on the outside. At the end of the day, he has the longer arms. Josh Taylor would have been forced to have to come to him if Davies had stayed in the middle of the ring using long arms, pecking away with jabs and straight right hands. That would have forced Taylor to come to him. Now, from an entertainment standpoint, it was better that Ohara Davies fought as recklessly as he did and went forward and did whatever. It's better. It made for a more entertaining fight. If he'd stood off, used those long arms and forced the shorter-armed but taller Taylor to come to him, it probably wouldn't have got good until well into the second half of the fight. But a more experienced Ohara Davies, if he had 15, 20, 30, well, he's nearly had 15 fights, but let's say he had 20, 30 fights, he'd fought at European level for a while, that's probably what he would have done. Kept it long. But he just didn't have the mental maturity, the ring IQ, or the ring craft to be able to think like that and implement something like that. The golfing class showed. Josh Taylor, an international amateur, vastly experienced as an amateur, had, I believe, a few hundred amateur fights. His ring craft was far more advanced and developed than Ohara Davies's. And his mental maturity in the ring, him being comfortable about what he was doing in the ring, was, again, far and away above Ohara Davies. So can Ohara Davies come back from this? It depends how dedicated he is to becoming better. He's young enough, certainly, but this was a very humiliating defeat. And you've got a situation where he's been humiliated in defeat because he quit, as well as getting battered and outclassed. A humiliating defeat, and he's been given over 100 grand fight purse. That can actually lead to disaster. If he'd been humiliated and defeated in a fight where he only made, let's say, 20 grand, 30 grand, he'd still have more incentive to come back because he'd still be hungry. But this young man's been given, over 100 grand and a humiliating defeat. So it's a make or break situation. He might just say, you know what? Let me set up some kind of business. Let me sail off into the sunset. He might lose his hunger. It's easy in this situation for a young guy like that who's just been embarrassed in the way that he was to take the money and just leave the sport, or take the money and not really apply himself to the sport as seriously as he did before. It's very easy for someone in his position to do that. So it all depends on the desire inside of Ohara Davies. I've never, and I've been on record and said this many times, I've never particularly rated Tony Sims as a trainer. Nothing against him as a person. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I've never particularly rated him. And I think Ohara Davies might want to look elsewhere for somebody that can train him and get the best out of him. When you're as awkward as Ohara Davies, nobody has to teach you how to be more awkward. Right? He already knows how to be awkward. That comes naturally to him. He needs to find a trainer who understands his strengths and weaknesses, and as I said earlier in the video, can strategize around Ohara Davies' strengths and weaknesses. Because he has ability there, there's no question. But it has to be implemented in the correct way. So we'll see. I watched Boxing Beans and Rhymes video, post-fight video, about the Ohara Davies-Josh Taylor fight. And he said Ohara Davies possibly has suspect punch resistance. I mean, possibly. I just think that Ohara Davies was out of his depth in the ring. I mean, he got to the point where he was desperate in the ring. He was taking a lot of shots. He was getting hit with hard body shots. And I just think mentally he wasn't in a good place. And when a fighter's not in a good place mentally, they can become more susceptible to head punches. That's what I've found in boxing in general. But if a fighter is in a good place mentally, they'll take shots better. I know some people might say, this sounds like nonsense, Hatman, but this is what I've been observing. Because I watch boxing like that. I noticed the little things. I noticed the, aspects of fighters' characters and personalities and whatnot, and how they are impacted by what's going on in the ring and the ramifications of that. So, for me, the jury's out on Ohara Davies' punch resistance. He might have suspect punch resistance because he was dropped by a jab at one point, I believe. He might have. But for me, the jury's out because he just seemed to be desperate and panicking in there against Josh Taylor. He fought hard, after the knockdowns. He tried to come back and force the fight. But, yeah, he just, I don't think he was in the right frame of mind. He was doing everything wrong. He wasn't setting anything up properly. He was throwing wide, clubbing, sloppy shots. Totally lost his composure. That's what you don't want to do in a crisis. That's, in boxing, rule 101. When you're in a crisis, don't panic. Don't lose your composure. That's when you got to be clever. That's when you got to be smart. I remember Customado, the late trainer of Mike Tyson and Jose Torres, Floyd Patterson, etc. One of his famous quotes, when he was talking about boxing, he said, when you get hit and you get hurt, that's when you got to be the calmest. That's when you got to be the smartest. And Ohara Davies clearly hadn't heard Customado say that, or hadn't taken heed of that kind of advice, because he did the exact opposite. He got hurt and then he basically panicked and thought, okay, shit, I got to throw as many hard punches as possible now. He wasn't smart. He wasn't clever. If you're smart and clever, when you get hurt, that's when you can actually get your opponent, because your opponent will often come in recklessly and you can catch him. I mean, you look at Tim Littles versus Frankie Lyles. That was a incredible fight from back in the 1990s that took place in the UK between two Americans. Frankie Lyles at the time, I believe, was world champion. And it was a case of, particularly Frankie Lyles counterpunching Tim Littles as he came in recklessly. Like, Tim Littles would hurt Lyles. Lyles would go in for the finish. Littles would go in for the finish and Lyles would catch him, classic example. If you ain't seen that fight, I recommend you go watch it on YouTube. Great fight. And of course, there are many other examples of stuff like that. Juan Manuel Marquez, when he knocked out Manny Pacquiao a couple years ago. Pacquiao was actually starting to get on top in that fight. Marquez lured him in and cracked him with that right hand and knocked him out cold. You know, that's the advantage, man. When you're hurt, when your opponent gets you, that's actually going to give you an advantage to a certain extent, or it can, because your opponent may get reckless when he comes in to finish you. You have to remain calm and smart and keep your boxing together. I mean, it depends on how hurt you are. If your legs are completely gone and you're wobbling around the ring like Amir Khan, then no, just grab on, just grab hold. But if you're not as badly hurt as that, you still have your legs and you can still get power in your shots. Be smart. You can still do holding, but when you get the opportunity, look at what you're doing and try and counterpunch your opponent. But these things come with experience. So, anyway, long-winded video, people, but there's a lot there for Ohara Davies to work on, obviously, including the mental side of his game. But that will come. If he continues to apply himself. And I think Ohara Davies, as I say, he just needs to find the right people to train him. He needs to be in the right environment. I think he's done very, very well, extremely well, from a marketing point of view, from a promotional point of view. He's only had, 13 or 14 fights, whatever it is. And he's already earned over 100 grand purse. I mean, that's incredible. Considering this guy's never fought even at, world level. I mean, European level, maybe fringe European level. He's never fought at world level, certainly. And to be earning that kind of money already, it's really an indication of how healthy British boxing is right now. That a guy on Ohara Davies' level can earn that much money for a fight. But it's also an indication of how well Ohara Davies has done in terms of publicizing himself, promoting himself, putting himself out there. It's made a lot of people hate him, yeah, but as long as it's putting money in his pocket, the people that hate him, they're not going to pay his bills. So he don't really care about that. Let me know what you think, people. Can Ohara Davies come back? What do you think went wrong? Do you agree with my assessment of what went wrong in there for Ohara Davies? At the end of the day, I'm not trying to sit here and say that Ohara Davies can beat Josh Taylor. No, I'm trying to say that Ohara Davies could have performed better. Whether that would have been enough to beat Josh Taylor is a whole other debate. But he could have performed better than he did. There's no question about it, because he made mistakes, and you can always rectify your mistakes. So, yeah. Let me know how you feel in the comment section below, people. It's happening.